Hello people, welcome to Night Out Notes. In previous video, we saw that file system had many problems, so DBMS was introduced to solve those problems. Now in this video, we'll go through how does user communicates with database, DBMS architecture. DBMS architecture is the system that explains how user communicates with database and how data flows inside the DBMS. Like it generally shows a journey of data from the user to the database and back from the user. It's a vice versa kind of thing. So we can define it like DBMS architecture is the structure that explains how a user interact with database, like it how communicates, how user can communicates with database and how data flows inside the DBMS. Like how end user communicate with database. It's all about the database communication with user. Depending on the size of application and the number of user, DBMS architecture is divided into three types: one-tier architecture, two-tier architecture and three-tier architecture. Let's go to one-tier architecture. In one-tier architecture, all the user data, DBMS and database are present inside a single system. In earlier days, like in 1980s and 1970s, we don't have large websites usually. One computer was used by one person. Since everything is inside one computer, only one person can use it. It is suitable only when the amount of data is very small. Even if there is no internet connection also, we can actually use it because the architecture still works as everything is stored locally. As organizations becoming larger, one person using one computer was no longer enough because people want multiple users to access the same databases. As organizations became large, one person using one computer was no longer enough. As people wanted multiple users to access the same database, that's where the two-tier architecture was introduced. Imagine a college where there are teachers, principal, accounts department, examination branch. Can anyone store separate databases on their own laptops? No, right? Here is two-tier architecture where we do have multiple clients, client 1, client 2 and up to client n, and those are connected to the server using a network. This is what I have written. Two-tier architecture is the database architecture in which the client, the users, communicates directly with the database server using a network. This is what the network meant by. This is also called as client-server architecture. Here the JDBC and ODBC acts as the bridge to communicate in between server and client. Without this, client cannot communicate with the server. Here client sends the request to the DBMS like server. In server, it understands whether the user is authenticated or not. If the user is found authenticated, then it gives a response back to the client again. This is what I have said. In this client request and the DBMS process, if it checks whether the user is authenticated or not, and then it gives back the response to the client. Here JDBC and ODBC stands for Java Database Connectivity API and ODBC stands for Open Database Connectivity. These both are APIs which acts like a bridge in between client and server, so the data is transmitted from the client to server in easy format. Let's consider an example through which you will understand very clearly. If teacher enters a student ID X, let's consider a student ID named X. The client sends request through JDBC, this Java database connectivity. It sends the request. Client sends the request to the server using JDBC, and then it reaches the database first, and then DBMS checks whether the X named ID is present inside the server or not. It checks its authenticity, like its original ID, like the student from that college or not. It will check and it will give the response back to the client. If it found the user is authenticated, like the user is legitimate, it sends the details to the client back. Since everyone is using database, multiple users can work together. This is where the supports multiple users. Here everyone is using the same database, like teachers, principal, students and everyone. So it supports multiple users. Here data is stored inside a single server, so that sharing can be easy because only from the single server everything is going transmitted to every client and all. Maintenance is also easy because only two-tier architecture, no clumsiness, no confusion, nothing. As we are considering college database, it is okay. What if we imagine Instagram? Crores of people uses it every day. Can everyone directly connect to the database? No, right? That's why three-tier architecture was introduced. This is the three-tier architecture. Here you can see this three-tier architecture clearly. This is the architecture used by almost every modern application. Like we say Instagram, it's using three-tier architecture. We say Amazon, it's using three-tier architecture. And more apps like WhatsApp, banking, etc. Everything is using this three-tier architecture. Because three-tier architecture do have three layers as the name it mentions. This is called as the presentation layer or client layer. It is simply like the user interface. Whatever the user sees on the screen belongs to this layer, like browser, mobile apps, etc. But this layer doesn't know where the database is actually stored. It only collects the data or information from the user and say that to the application layer. And this application layer sends it to database layer, but there is no direct connectivity between this presentation layer and database layer. Application layer is like a brain of this three-tier architecture. I'm keep on saying this brain of three-tier architecture. It is that important to this three-tier architecture. Like it performs all processings like authentication, whether the username is correct or not. If we enter the username as XYZ rather than XYG, then it considers it as a wrong username and it sends to the client like a wrong username so that we can verify it and we can enter it back. And authorization, whether the user having permission or not. And validation, the entered data is valid or not. When it comes to the business logic, should we consider the request like we need to accept it or reject it? And API processing, it is the communication between the mobile apps and the websites. To understand this processing in this application layer or business layer, I am considering the banking sector as an example. Suppose you are willing to transfer 5,000 rupees to someone account. Like it will immediately check with the database whether the balance is available, like he have entered the right password or not, if the OTP is verified or not, or the daily limit was exceeded or not. All these things will be verified by the application layer and then send it to the database layer. Like in this database layer, only have a major responsibility to manage the data. It only have the responsibility of data management. It does not know where the user is, like as the same as presentation layer doesn't know where the database layer was. The database layer also doesn't know who is the client and what is he asking for. It only sends to the application layer and application retrieve back to the database layer, and database searches whatever the things application layer asks and it send it back to the application layer and then to the client. So there is no direct communication between database and the client too. So it simply executes the duties of application layer and it also knows to perform only these operations, like it can store and retrieve, update or delete the data. That's it. Like to explain this three-tier architecture in detail, I am considering Instagram as an example. If I am entering the password into this presentation layer, in this presentation layer I can just log in, I can just enter the details into it, then it sends it to the application layer. Then application layer checks whether my password is correct or not. If yes, it sends the request to the database layer, then database layer find my account and send the information back to the application layer. Then application layer prepares its response and finally my Instagram opens on my feed. That's on the presentation layer. This is all about DBMS architecture. Hope you like this video. Until then, don't forget to hit that bell icon and subscribe to my channel so that you will get more informative videos like this. If you found this video really helpful, please like and share. Meet you in another video. Bye bye.